So it looks like we got a big one this weekend. Match day 3, Atlanta, Charlotte. Now this is one of MLS's newest rivalries. But it seems as if it's manufactured. From the outside looking in, it looks as if it's forced. You know, when it comes to Southern sports in general, like Atlanta, Charlotte was never known as two rival cities. As a matter of fact, when it comes to sports rivalries in the Southeast, like largely professional sports, Atlanta, the only true rivalry that we ever heard regarding to the city of Atlanta was the NFL rivalry between the Saints and the Falcons. Now that's two legitimate rivalry. I mean, both teams have been historically pretty somewhere between average and mediocre. But the reason why those two teams are rivalry because it's more so a culture clash. The rivalry is more so a rivalry between the people rather than the teams itself, because it's a big culture clash between the fans. Could this be the same case in Atlanta, Charlotte? Time will tell. These two cities, we don't even know they have a rich soccer history to begin with. I mean, we heard a lot about the soccer culture in St. Louis this past weekend. But the cities of Atlanta, the cities of Charlotte in general, like when it comes to professional sports in general, these cities are not well known, they're not well popular. Now, granted, Atlanta United has been successful since 2017, but they have cooled down since the 2020 pandemic. And it looks as if they could turn the tide in 2023. But this all depends on whether or not Thiago Almada stays for the entire season. We know the Argentina coach is trying to get him out of there. He's trying to get him to a Premier League team as fast as possible. He's basically giving him the same advice that he gave Tati Castellanos to go play in Europe. Today, we don't even know if Tati Castellanos ever got a chance to play with the Argentina national team yet. But I'm not going to get too much into that. Atlanta labels itself as King of the South. And it looks as if Charlotte is trying to mirror itself as Atlanta. Charlotte entered the league as a team with surprise. Like, many people didn't think that Charlotte would ever get an MLS team before Detroit, San Diego, Las Vegas, Phoenix, Tampa. But they did. Because billionaire owner David Tepper had the money. David Tepper basically paid his way into the league. He didn't need to build a soccer-specific stadium. All he had to do was pay the entry fee and have a NFL stadium ready and just have a team ready. And that's basically what he did. Charlotte is basically modeling itself. It's forming itself the same way Atlanta United did. The difference, however, is they have not been as successful as Atlanta coming out the gate. This is largely because MLS in the 2020s is a much tougher league when Charlotte entered than it was for Atlanta during the tweens. When Atlanta entered in 2017, the league was less competitive. It was less fierce compared to now. You also had less teams when Atlanta entered. So Atlanta, you you can't take away their success because they earned it, but you have every right to question it. You call yourself King of the South, but how? And is that self-proclamation of the highest status of royalty, was it premature? At that time of you winning your championship, Charlotte wasn't around. Miami wasn't around. Austin wasn't around. St. Louis wasn't around. Orlando was around, but Orlando was very young. And up to this day, all of you guys are still very young. But also Nashville wasn't around either when you won your championship in 2017. But now these teams are around. And with the exception of St. Louis, Nashville, Orlando, Miami, even Charlotte, they're more experienced. Now, granted, Charlotte only has 1 year under his belt, but even in his first year of existence, it had a little playoff push. It made a little. So the question is, did Atlanta United prematurely label itself as king? One thing that we all need to realize is self-proclaimed kings are not real. Meaning, those who call themselves king of the South, king of hip-hop, king of football, king of whatever. You're not a real king if you self-proclaim yourself as such. Kingship is passed down through royalty. Typically speaking, what is your worth? What is it that you have to show to prove that you're a king? What are your accolades? Now, Atlanta does have accolades, but they got it at a time where the competition wasn't as fierce. Honestly, we won't find out who the true king of the South is until 2040. The reason why 2040? Well, you got the 2020s for all teams to at least have 10 years under his belt. By the year 2030, every team in the Southeast will have at least 10 years of MLS experience under his belt. Then in the 2030s, that experience, that full 10-year experience will come to test, and we'll see how these teams evolve. So 2020s, you get your experience, your full experience. In the 2030s, it's time to see who will evolve and who will be left behind, who will remain stagnant. So as we enter match day 3, and we're watching the Atlanta United Charlotte FC rivalry, what is this rivalry about? What is the purpose of this rivalry? This rivalry doesn't even have a name yet. You see, it didn't take long for Cincinnati and Columbus to create a name for their rivalry. We're still waiting on the name of the rivalry for Kansas City, St. Louis. But this is still St. Louis' first year. Charlotte has a full year under his belt, and Atlanta United fans have been talking a lot of trash towards Charlotte, but there's still no rivalry. There's no official rivalry name for this match. Should we call it the Southern Belle Series? Should we call it the Battle Along 85? One thing that Atlanta should be very careful of is this. In the Southeast, there's no such thing as one team being a rival. The Southeast is like the Cascadia boys. Like, yes, Seattle and Portland have their own rivalry, but they don't overlook Vancouver. Vancouver is still a serious rival. That's why it's called the Cascadia Cup. It has to be the same way in the Southeast. And then you can't just call Orlando and Nashville a rival and then leave out Miami. That is how average teams become more powerful than you in a quicker fashion, because you have spent so many years overlooking that team and you're just trading players and giving money to that team thinking they will be nothing, and then they use those players and that money to their benefit to the point where they become more powerful than you. And at the end of the day, you get the credit for their success because you helped them, because you overlooked them thinking they will be nothing, but they used the resources that you provided in order for them to become good. I keep saying this, and I will keep on saying this because it's going to happen. Inter Miami CF is a sleeping giant. And once they get everything together, once they get their code of conduct together, once they truly start taking this MLS business serious, they're going to be unstoppable in the East. And one reason for this is because European players, the best European players, there's only two teams that they talk about playing for when it comes to MLS. And that's Inter Miami CF, and that's LAFC. The top players in Europe don't mention Atlanta United. They don't mention NYCFC. They don't mention Philly. Some mentions LA Galaxy, but not as much as LAFC. They don't even mention Seattle. Seattle's an afterthought. The two major teams that the top players overseas in Europe talk about is Miami and LAFC. And that's something that you can't ignore, Atlanta. Since you proclaim yourself as King of the South. So, throughout this season and throughout this decade, let us all remember one thing. Self-proclaimed kings are not real. Atlanta, you gained your title between 2017 and 2020 at a time where the Southeast was still young. Teams just entering the league and they're just learning how to walk. Nashville is making the transition from walking to running. Orlando is now running. They won a US Open Cup title. Orlando is running. Miami is still making that transition from walking to running. And so is Charlotte. Eventually, somewhere between now and 2030, all of those teams will be up and running, just like you, Atlanta United. And that's when the competition will be way more fierce than it is now. We won't find out who the true king of the South is until the 2040s. The 2020s is the development era. The 2030s will be the evolution era. And whoever has the most championships by 2040, the end of 2040, that's when we will know who the true king of the South is. So we're going to watch this Atlanta-Charlotte match, and we're going to enjoy it, because this is the birth of something special, not between two teams, but an entire Southeast region as a whole.